We've got a very special guest here and a very special guest in the studio in Melbourne, but Dr. Patrick Moore here is the co-founder of Greenpeace, and in fact was for some time a significant figure in the Greenpeace international movement, Save the Whales and all the rest of it, but left Greenpeace some years ago because of its anti-science approach. And I thought we'd be able to tonight hear views from men from different ends of the spectrum, so to speak. So if we could just start with Dr. Patrick Moore here. 18 years since there's been any warming of the globe. What's everyone going on about?
Well, it's quite spectacular, actually, because there was a lot of concern that the world would warm if we kept pouring carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. And even though in the last 18 years, 25% of all the CO2 that humans have ever put into the atmosphere has gone in there, there has been no significant warming of the world's climate. And so, therefore, it brings into serious question whether or not there really is a strong relationship between carbon dioxide and warming of the Earth's atmosphere.
Well, that's a pretty good start.
Well, there's a start, but let's hear the view.
I was going to say, Professor Erwin Jackson is in our Melbourne studio. I just wonder, Erwin, what's your response to that? Is the Earth warming?
Well, it is, and there's no doubt about that, really. If you look at the observational record, you look at what's happening to our ice sheets, you look at what's happening in the oceans, there's all clear evidence that the world is warming. Yes, the rate of warming has slowed in the last few years. It hasn't been as rapid as it has been previously. But there are potentially very good reasons for that. We have natural variability in the climate system. We also are seeing some parts of the ocean heating up quite significantly. So the extra energy we're trapping in the Earth system is going into different places, not just into our surface temperature.
But could we just take the point that the Professor has made?
But I also think it's important. Yeah.
Just the point that you made there, and to hear Dr. Moore. Now, you said there is no doubt that the globe is warming, and you talked about the ice sheets and so on. You would contest that, wouldn't you?
Well, I would say that I think you would agree, Owen, that the Antarctic ice is at the highest level it's been. The sea ice around Antarctica is more extensive than it has been since we started measuring it in 1979. If you add the area of sea ice around Antarctica with the area of sea ice in the Arctic, there is actually no trend whatsoever since 1979. It's about the same as it was then. And when you say it's slowing down, it's actually slowed down to zero, which is what we call the pause. And the IPCC agrees with that. The East Anglia University agrees with that.
I'm sorry, Patrick, that's actually not what the IPCC say.
Yes,
they say
that's
that
what Pachori has said.
The last 3 decades have been the warmest on record, and they've been warmer than everyone before it. They also say that the global increase in temperature has increased over the period you're talking about. Yes, not as quickly as it had in the previous period, but they've also said it's actually increases. So it's actually incorrect to say, if you look at the full body of the IPCC work, to suggest that the world isn't warming. And yes, the parts of the Arctic, parts of the Antarctic, have a higher level of sea ice than they have in the past, and there's good reason for that, because the global climate is changing, which is promoting greater winds, which is promoting greater ice build-up in certain parts of the Antarctic.
But can we just get one fact so we know what we're talking about here? I'm utterly confused, and we've only been going here for 5 minutes. Has the Earth warmed in the last 18 years or not? Let's hear from both men. Firstly, Dr. Moore.
Well, the satellite record shows zero warming in the last 18 years, despite the fact that 1/4 of all the CO2 we have ever emitted, because of the rapidly increasing rate of CO2 emissions from China and Russia and Indonesia and India and the United States and around the world, has happened in the last 18 years. So there's a tremendous disconnect between the rate of carbon dioxide buildup in the atmosphere and the warming, which has essentially disappeared, gone to zero in the last 18 years.
Let's get the Professor's answer to that.
Well, first of all, I should clarify, I'm actually not a professor.
Oh, my apologies.
Well,
you can be for one night. You can be for one night.
Thank you.
Perhaps you might tell our viewers what exactly your position is, Erwin.
I'm Deputy CEO at the Climate Institute.
Right.
So the core issue is that Patrick's entitled to his opinion. As the public and as policymakers and the media commentators, we need to make a judgment based on the evidence, and I think everyone would agree with that. If you look at the evidence that is put forward by CSIRO, NASA, every major research institution on the planet, they've all come to basically the same conclusion, that the world is continuing to warm, albeit not as fast as it was, and that human activities is the principal cause behind that. Now, Patrick is absolutely right. He's completely entitled to his opinion, but if you're making policy and you're making judgments about the future of our energy mix, you don't base it on the opinion of one person. You base it on the overwhelming evidence that's before you, which has been given to us by the scientific community and people like NASA and CSIRO who put people on the moon.
Can I ask you then just specifically, in this 18 years, I don't know why we're talking about 18 years and not longer, but if we're talking about these 18 years, in terms of surface temperatures, have they gone up, have they gone down, or have they remained static?
They've gone up, but they haven't gone up as fast as they were in the previous decade. And part of the reason for that is 1998, in the year we're talking about, was an extremely hot year. And funnily enough, it looks like this year will actually be the hottest year on record, based on the observations that we're seeing in the climate system at the moment. So I look forward to people who keep saying that the world has stopped warming to say, well, when this year turns out probably to be the hottest on record, that warming has started again.
Erwin, I don't know, you blokes have sort of learnt all this stuff off, and you say, well, if I keep repeating it often enough, someone will believe me. You mentioned NASA. I've got a quote here from NASA. In the 21st century, greenhouse gases have continued to accumulate in the atmosphere, just as they did in the 20th century, but global average surface temperatures have stopped rising in tandem with the gases. Dr. Moore, isn't that what you were saying?
Exactly.
So, I mean, what
the issue is not, but the issue is, I think we need to disconnect two issues here. One is absolutely right. The level of emissions that we are putting into the atmosphere from carbon pollution has been increasingly very rapidly in the last few years. Surface temperature, based on all the evidence that's been put forward by the international community, are increasing. But that doesn't mean to say other things aren't happening at the moment. But we've created a change in the LNG balance of the climate system, which is the equivalent, roughly, of detonating about 4 atomic bombs about the size of Hiroshima every second. That heat and energy has to go somewhere. Some of it's going into the surface temperature, some of it's going into the ocean, some of it's melting ice, and the overall picture is very clear. That is
a seriously silly analogy to talk about Hiroshima bombs exploding.
Absolutely.
What you're saying is that you believe that more heat is coming into the Earth's system, and you don't know where it's going. Some people are saying it's in the deep ocean. Now it's hiding in the deep ocean. That's where they've postulated it must be going,
and that's been disproved,
because it's not warming the atmosphere. But the fact is, it's possible that that heat is actually not coming in to the Earth's atmosphere, because climate sensitivity to carbon dioxide is nowhere near as much as people thought before. And many people are now beginning to think that the positive feedbacks that they were building into these computer models are wrong, and there may in fact be a negative feedback to CO2 increase. All else being equal, it is true that carbon dioxide would cause some warming. But what if the water vapor actually suppresses the CO2's impact? Because all else is not equal. There are many factors at work here, and the Earth is not warming at the present time, even though CO2 is going up.
I don't understand what we're talking about, because just let's take CO2, carbon dioxide, and 97% of it is naturally occurring. The issue here is we are blaming human beings for the incidence of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere when the world of human beings produces 3% of carbon dioxide. God knows what minuscule amount Australia produces, but as a result, we've had a carbon, and wrongly called a carbon tax. We're not talking about carbon, we're talking about carbon dioxide, but it's called a carbon tax. We've got a carbon tax, we've got renewable energy targets, we've got wind turbines being subsidised by taxpayers, all because of this hoax that man is producing carbon dioxide, which is despoiling the atmosphere, when, aren't I right in saying to both men, only about 3% of it is created by human beings?
Erwin, can you give us an answer on that?
I think it sort of slightly misses the point, to be honest. Like, the core issue is that, yes, natural systems release carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases, and yes, natural systems absorb those gases. The core issue is that we've knocked that system out of balance. And there's absolutely no doubt, because we can measure it. We can measure it fairly directly by looking at the atmospheric chemistry, that the level of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere and other greenhouse gases are probably the highest they've ever been in the last 800,000 years. And we can see quite clearly that that's the result, because of the isotopes associated with that, that's mainly from the burning of fossil fuels. There's no doubt about it. Even the most hardened climate skeptic who is a serious climate scientist would never doubt that. But the core issue is we've knocked the system out of balance, and we're the people who can address that.
I don't agree with that, and that's a piece of rhetoric, Erwin, that you people keep repeating like some biblical truth. But isn't it true, Dr. Moore, if I could say to you, one of the real issues for the viewers out there is that our kids in school are being taught that carbon dioxide is a pollutant.
Yes, and as if there was a balance, so-called balance in the first place. The climate has been changing throughout the history of the Earth, and there's never been anything that you could call a balance. In fact, carbon dioxide is actually lower now than it has been through the entire history of modern life, which goes back not 800,000 years, but 500 million years. Carbon dioxide has been higher. And also the temperature of the Earth today, we're actually in the Pleistocene Ice Age still. This is an interglacial period, but we are in a very cold period of the Earth's history today. It's 14.5 degrees Celsius, average global temperature. Most of life's history has been up in the 20s somewhere, so much higher than it is today. But the big lie, and the really important fact, is to call carbon dioxide a pollutant and to teach our children this is heresy, because carbon dioxide is the most important nutrient food for all life on Earth. We are carbon-based life. All life is carbon-based. Where does that carbon come from? CO2 in the atmosphere, nowhere else. And in fact, plants would rather have carbon dioxide 3 to 4 times higher than it is today. It's 400 parts per million now. The optimum CO concentration for plant growth is between 1,200 and 1,600 parts per million. That is an incontrovertible fact. That is why glasshouse growers purposely put the exhaust from their heaters, which is rich in CO2 from their wood and gas heaters, into the greenhouse to increase the concentration 2, 3, 4 times, to increase the growth of the fruits and vegetables they have in there by 50 to 100%. And we know that today the Earth is greening. Everybody out there, Google greening of the Earth, and you will find a map that shows you that photosynthesis is increasing all over the planet, and that we are getting greener, our crops are growing faster, our forests are growing faster. This is a fact. CO2 is not pollution.
Can I just jump in here for a second?
I need you to have some response here, but look, Erwin Jackson, you've got a lot to respond to, so go for it.
Well, I think I'd just actually respond to one central point, because I think we could go back and forth talking about the various elements of what Patrick and I say all night. But I think there's a more fundamental issue here, which goes to the point that Alan raised early on about we've had all these policies put in place in Australia, some of which have been wound back, some of which haven't. And I think as a policymaker or a government or someone in business, when you make your decision, you've got to base it on the best evidence you've got. And you can listen to Patrick and you might believe what he says, but you want to be pretty sure that he's right. Because if he's wrong, which most of the world scientific community would suggest he is, then we're taking a pretty big bet. So the analogy that is often used is, if 9 out of 10 engineers told you not to get on a plane because it was going to crash, you wouldn't get on it. And that's the sort of situation we're in. If you're a government, if you're a business, or if you're a policymaker anywhere in the world, you've got to look at the objective evidence before you from the experts who know what they're talking about.
Erwin, that's a myth. That is a myth, Erwin. Now, this is another one of your myths.
It's not a myth. It's not a myth. The IPCC is a reality. It's just a reality you guys don't want to acknowledge.
The IPCC is flawed and demonstrably flawed, and it is not true that the science is settled, and it is not true that the bulk... Well, here's...
What is true is the majority of scientists agree with what Erwin's saying.
Let's hear it with Dr.
Hang on, Erwin hasn't had a fair go to finish yet. We're not giving Patrick a go yet. Go on, Erwin.
Yeah, but I think this is the point that Alan and I'm making is this is about risk assessment. If you're right and if Patrick's right, what have we done? We've made our energies more efficient. We've produced energy which doesn't actually pollute the atmosphere, whether it be carbon dioxide or other forms of pollutants. And we've actually made our economy more efficient because we've become more energy efficient. So, but if the majority of the scientific opinion, whether it be NASA, CSIRO, the Bureau of Meteorology, all the major research institutions in the world are right, then we've taken a very big risk, because once climate change has started in a big way, we can't stop it.
How is it efficient to drive electricity prices through the roof. You're paying 30 cents a kilowatt hour in this country now. My country, Canada, it's 10 cents. Germany has gone to 48 cents a kilowatt hour because of the renewables. How is it efficient to drive energy prices higher? That is not efficient. All it does is drive poor people into energy poverty. But please, Google optimum carbon dioxide level for plant growth. Plants are the basis of all life on Earth. They convert sunlight, carbon dioxide, water, and a few minerals from the soil into all the food for every animal on this planet, including human beings. That is the carbon cycle.
And they also need, and at certain temperatures, they die. And you can't just talk about one side of the story.
The temperature is not going up.
We know in this
It's
country,
CO2
country very well the impact of drought. And as
Oh, God, you're not going to blame that on global warming, are you?
And your dams are full.
No,
and
what I'm going to tell you.
Let him get a sentence out.
No,
for God's sake.
you've just spent $6 billion on
get a sentence out. Go on,
desalination
Erwin, go
plants
for your
that
life.
aren't necessary.
Yeah, the point is that if you look at basically look at the work that CSIRO are doing, and again I come back to the Bureau of Meteorology, NASA, all the major climate centres in the world, show that large parts of Australia are drying out, and that will continue to happen. If you're trying to grow food, you need water, and carbon dioxide does have a stimulating effect to an extent on plant growth, but that is limited depending on the plant species and the type of plant it is.
No, it isn't limited.
But above certain temperatures, the plants also die. And that's why we see, for example, the World Bank when we talk about energy poverty, this is why the World Bank is no longer investing in coal except in exceptional circumstances, because they know that climate change threatens the development of many countries.
Look, one of your colleagues...
So you can't just take one side of the coin.
One of your heroes, Erwin, Tim Flannery, said that we're all going to run out of water and the dams would be empty. The dams here are all full. But if I could come back to the settled science. Now, I don't know how many scientists you've got to cite, but today I was reading a paper by a US climate scientist, Judith Curry, and a climate researcher, Nick Lewis. And they've published a paper on real, not homogenised temperatures. You mentioned the CSIRO. They're utterly discredited for homogenising temperatures, that is, adjusting them away from the real temperatures to suit their particular ideology. These are real observed temperatures, and they compared actual recorded temperatures from the period 1859 to 1882 with a period 1995 and 2001. What they found was that CO2 generated by human activity in the latter period was double what it was in the first, and that the temperature effect of doubling of human-generated CO2 in the atmosphere created only 2.45 degrees Celsius increase in temperature, whereas your esteemed biblical International Panel on Climate Change said the maximum temperature increase would be 4.5 degrees. So they committed to two periods. One, the latter period, double the CO2, the temperature increase 2.45. Very tolerable increase.
Alan, where was the paper published?
I beg your pardon? In America.
Where was the paper?
In America.
Where,
I'll give you the name.
In which scientific journal?
In which it's peer-reviewed, unlike the IPCC.
The IPCC goes through the most extensive peer review process in scientific history.
You can check it. Judith Curry is the name, C-O-R-R-Y.
You just said the IPCC is not peer-reviewed.
There are several papers from the IPCC are not peer-reviewed. Patrick Moore.
Most of the papers cited by the IPCC are not peer-reviewed. That's been proven long ago.
Correct.
They came out and said that.
Please, come on, you can't get into the IPCC
glaciers
process
in the
unless the
Himalayas
paper is
would be gone in
peer-reviewed.
35 years. You know, they have been wrong on so many counts.
Are you aware of Judith Curry and Nick Lewis?
Yes, and she is very much credible these days with the climate science community, not with the skeptics, but with the climate science community. Judith Curry is very credible. And it's only the activists who are continuing to say that the global climate is continuing to warm. It is not. There's been this 18-year pause during which a huge amount of CO2 has been put into the atmosphere. But the other point is, as I have made, carbon dioxide is not a pollutant. It is not toxic. As a matter of fact, it's at 400 parts per million, and in submarines, the Navy allows it to go up to 5,000 parts per million without harm to the crew, underwater for 30 days. It's not a pollutant. It is the most important food for life on Earth, and that's what we should be teaching our children, the carbon cycle. It's the most important cycle for all of life on Earth.
Now, Erwin, I just wanted to take us back, just go back a few moments. I listened to Alan and this person, Judith Curry, and you can pluck various scientists and opinions out of the morass.
That's what Erwin's doing, yeah.
No, it's not. When it comes to the IPCC,
I'd like to know who
how
he's
many
quoting.
scientists are involved in the IPCC?
2,000 or so.
2,000.
Yeah.
2,000.
Out of hundreds of thousands.
And let me talk you through the process.
Well, there are hundreds of thousands of climate scientists. Can I say to you, nonsense.
Oh, come
there are
on,
not
Graham.
hundreds of thousands
Graham.
of climate scientists,
Graham.
are there?
Graham.
You know there aren't.
Climate scientist is a self-serving term. They are the self-appointed climate scientists. If you don't agree with them, then, oh, you're not a climate
No,
scientist
that's-
because your PhD is in physics or math or geology, whereas half of them who call themselves the climate scientists, their PhDs are not in climate science.
Well, I'd like to look at the ones where they are,
Graham,
and
I'll
I
give
think
you-
you'll find the overwhelming majority of them
you
don't
will
agree
not.
with you,
I'll
and that's
give you
your
a bit to
problem.
read, and I'll
You
tell you
will
what it's
not. It's a
about. It's an
hoax.
industry which gets money from government, and they're going to tell government what government wants to hear, and they are funded. Now, the CSIRO...
Can I suggest here that what you expect us to believe that there is a grand conspiracy between the world's top scientific bodies,
No.
all the governments of the world who review the IPCC
That's not
reports
true.
and tick it off in terms of the summary for policymakers, and that every comment that is made on IPCC report the authors have to respond to. You can't reference a paper in the IPCC unless it's actually been through effectively a peer review process.
Incorrect.
And it's not.
I mean,
go to the IPCC's
but you
website
just-
and have a look at the
Erwin,
process. It's all
Erwin,
very clear in the public domain.
Erwin, saying none of that. We're just saying a couple of simple facts. One, the atmosphere hasn't warmed for 18 years. Two, 97% of it is
But Alan,
naturally...
as I said,
hang
that's
on,
not a
hang on.
fact. You say it is a fact, but it is
Hang on.
not a fact.
Just a minute,
Hang
Erwin.
on, hang on.
Alan will make
Hang
his
on.
point. I'm hearing you.
97% is naturally occurring. We are going through this massive cost that Patrick has alluded to in electricity, renewables being fed into the system, people watching this program can't put their blankets on because they can't afford the electricity bill. Industry is migrating to Canada and America where the energy costs are cheaper because it hasn't been escalated. We're demonising coal in this country, but we export it to China so that China can have cheap energy. That's perfectly okay, but we demonise it here. And there's 3% of all the CO2 in the world created by man, and little Australia's creating a bit here, and we're being punished like all hell with taxpayer impositions because of that. It does not make sense.
Why don't we then get honest, though, about electricity increases? Why don't we say we gold-plated the network when we didn't have to? And that's been massively the reason.
That has been a factor.
That's by far the biggest
Not the
factor, and
biggest
you know it.
factor.
Now,
Not the
over
biggest
time, I don't disagree that if we don't do something about wind power and the subsidies we're giving that, it'll be a problem. But overwhelmingly, the reason we've got high electricity prices, the gold plating, and that, we've got absolutely nothing to do with any of the debate we've had tonight. Now, Erwin, we're going to have to wrap this up, so I just give you 30 seconds and 30 seconds to Patrick.
Oh. Yeah, I think as I come back to my central point, like we pay millions of dollars a year to train some of the best climate scientists in the world, some of the best economists in the world, and some of the best natural scientists in the world. And it would just be foolhardy not to listen to the advice that they're giving us. The second point is that energy markets are distorted, and they're distorted because we don't factor in the $2 trillion subsidy given to fossil fuels every year. That's an IMF estimate. That's not my estimate. That's come from one of the world's leading economic agencies, and they themselves say we need to correct that and move towards things like even doubling effectively the price of coal to reflect the damage it causes to our health, to our environment and to our economies.
Patrick.
If you keep giving these scientists millions of dollars a year to tell you you have a problem and you need to fix it, and please give me more money so I can keep studying this problem, they will keep telling you that it's a problem. This is a self-perpetuating, massive convergence of interests, not a conspiracy, but a convergence of interests among elites in society, including the media, politicians, environmentalists, scientists, and business who wants to look green. And it's killing us because there is nothing wrong with the Earth's climate. What is wrong is the climate of the intellect. It is an intellectual climate problem, not a science climate problem, not an Earth climate problem. Carbon dioxide is a food for life on Earth, and more of it would be good. And it's not even causing extreme warming, and it's not going to kill the plants. Why are there 300 million people in Canada, in the United States, I'm sorry, and only 30 million people in Canada, which is bigger? One word: cold. Same with northern Russia. If northern Canada and northern Russia, which comprise about 30% of the land in this world, was warm enough to grow potatoes, we would be able to have some more food for the people in this world. A warmer world would be a better world for people and most other species.
Well, we'll see if we can grow a few spuds for you around here. Look, we'll have to leave it at that. I'm not sure that we've enlightened everybody, but it's been an interesting debate. Thank you both for participating, Patrick Moore and Erwin Jackson.
Thank you, Erwin.
We'll be back in just a moment.
Thank you, Patrick.